Hello Brainerds, my name is Jace. Welcome to the Big Brain Pastors. So in this video, I'm going to be taking you through the histology of epithelial tissue. If you looked at my anatomy overview, I partially talked about epithelial tissue being one of the four basic tissues of the body. So in this video, I'm going to introduce it and talk about it in detail. So I would actually urge you to actually stick with me to the end of this video, because I'm going to release some very important content that you will need for your knowledge. And then at the end of this video, I have put practice questions, so I would urge you to also attempt those questions and simply see if you've understood or not. And if you haven't understood, please feel free to rewatch the video. With that being said, let's jump into it. So what is epithelial tissue? By definition, epithelial tissue is just simply a group of cells, since a tissue is a group of cells, right? So this is a group of epithelial cells that are compacted together with little extracellular matrix that function to cover external and internal surface lining. So when you think of epithelial tissue, think of covering, lining, protection. So when you think of these three functions of epithelial tissue, think of, covering body surfaces. For example, our skin. The top layer of our skin, which is the epidermis, is actually made up of epithelial cells. So that's epithelial tissue. Then think of hollow parts such as blood vessels and ducts. So our blood vessels and ducts are actually made up of what? Epithelial tissue. And protection, as we know that our skin protects us, it acts as a waterproof, right? Then when you think of epithelial tissue, think of another function such as absorption in the intestinal lining and the renal system. The renal system is something to do with what? With the urinary system, okay, such as the bladder, the kidneys and stuff. Then think of secretion, such as in the parenchymal cells of the glands. Then think of excretion in the kidneys as well. All right, so these are some of the diagrams that I've put about so that you can see where epithelial tissue is actually found. So here is a picture of the skin. Then here is a picture of, a blood vessel. As you can see, that's a blood vessel, and with these here in the lining, making the smooth lining of the blood vessel, is the epithelial tissue. Here you don't call it epithelial cells, you call them endothelial cells. So epithelial tissue, depending on the parts where they are found, they actually change names. We're going to talk about that. Then another part where epithelial tissue is actually found is in the lumen of the small intestine. Then another part is simply in the the ureter, the urinary system. So here it's called transitional epithelium. Okay, so these are some of the parts where epithelial tissue is actually found. So as you can see there, you have in the trachea, you have in the lungs, you have in the GIT, the gastrointestinal tract, then in the bladder and everything. So we're going to talk about that. So stick with me. Okay, so what are some of the general characteristics of epithelial tissue? So the general characteristics are, number one, the epithelial tissue is tightly packed. So the cells are tightly joined together with little intercellular space. So the joining together of these epithelial cells is actually by cellular junctions. We're not going to talk about the cellular junctions in this video, but it's going to be covered in another video where we talk about different types of cell junctions. Okay. Then another characteristic is that the epithelial cells are actually supported on a basement membrane. They rest on a basement membrane. So the basement membrane is actually the support of the epithelial cells or tissue. Okay. Then, according to visibility, the epithelial tissue or cells are actually visible under a light microscope and electron microscope. Remember, these are microscopic structures, right? Then, according to vasculature, epithelial tissue is actually avascular. Avascular, means not. So meaning that there is no vasculature. There are no blood vessels in epithelial tissue. Okay. Then, according to regeneration, the epithelial cells are able to regenerate whenever they die, whenever there is cell death of epithelial cells. These epithelial tissues are actually able to regenerate themselves. Why? This is because they contain stem cells. So stem cells are actually unipotent or multipotent cells which have not yet specialized in function, but due to presence of certain molecular entities, they are able to be controlled to be formed into epithelial cells. I hope that makes sense. So these are some of the general characteristics of epithelial tissue. Then here's a diagram which I'm just going to show you what we were talking about, the general characteristics here. So the first one was they're tightly compacted. So as you can see, this is an epithelial cell and this is an epithelial cell. So they are tightly compacted. They are held together by junctions, cellular junctions. So some of the cellular junctions are tight junctions, as you can see here. Then we have desmosomes and hemidesmosomes. Like I said, we're not going to talk about cellular junctions in this video, but you're going to understand them in other videos. But one thing you should know is that they are tightly packed together. The another thing is that they are supported on a basement membrane. So as you can see, these epithelial cells are actually supported on a basement membrane. This is a basement membrane there. Okay, then according to visibility, we say they are only visible under a microscope. Then vasculature, as you can see, there's no any vasculature in this cell. Then regeneration, they are regenerated due to stem cells. Okay, then now, how is epithelial tissue actually classified? So this is classification of epithelial cells. Okay, so when we talk of classification, there are actually three main ways in which epithelial tissue can be classified. So the first one is simply classification by number of layers. So when we talk of number of layers, in short, how many layers are on top of each other? So you can have one layer or more than one layer, right? That's the classification. There is a way in which we call that. Then there is classification by shape of the cells. So the cells have got their shape. So you classify also the second one is you classify them according to their shape. They can be either flat, they can be either cuboidal, they can be either columnar. We're going to talk about that, don't worry. Then there is also the third one, which is, these are the three main classifications, by the way. So the third one is classification by the function of the cells. So that's why now we talk about glandular epithelium, which is going to be covered in another video. But here in this video, we're going to focus on the first two types of classifications. So let's start with the first one. So classification by number of layers. So like I said, we have a single layer, right? When you talk of a single layer, as you can see, like this. So this is a single layer of epithelia on top, and this is a basement membrane. Here, this black stain here, this is a basement membrane. All right. So how do you call epithelial tissue with only a single layer? You call it simple epithelium. I hope that makes sense. Then the second one, when you have more than one layer, you call it whenever you have multiple layers. In this instance, as you can see here, we have like multiple layers on top of each other like that, and the basement membrane is there. So in such a case, you call this stratified epithelium. So these are strata, meaning that layers, right? So this is stratified epithelium. So we have simple epithelium and the stratified epithelium according to number of layers. I hope that makes sense. We proceed. So take note that whenever we are dealing with number of layers, classification according to number of layers, we do not consider the shape of the epithelial cells. So it doesn't matter the shape of the epithelial cells. As long as it's a single layer on top, we call it simple epithelium. When it's more than one, we call it stratified epithelium, regardless of their shapes. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so let's go to the next classification, which is classification by the shape now. We talked of the layers, now we're talking about the shapes. So there are mainly three shapes of epithelium, of how epithelial cells appear. So the first one is whenever we have squamous epithelium. So squamous means flat epithelium. So flat means it's called squamous. In this type, the cells are actually flattened and their height is shorter compared to their width, right? So if I am pretty sure, I think I have a diagram. Right, so something like this. So as you can see here, their height is actually shorter. So as you can see, this height is shorter than the width. All right, something like that. So the height is shorter than the width. Okay, so it's flat. All right, so some of the characteristics now, the characteristics of squamous epithelia or flat epithelia, you call it squamous. Number one, it has a flat nucleus. So please take note of these characteristics. Right? So number one, it has flat epithelia, as you can see there, because of the shape of the cell. Even the nucleus itself, it will be flat. Okay. Then the cells appear thin and flat, like I have said, because their cytoplasm actually form a thin layer. Okay. Then the third characteristic is that the cells are wider than they are tall. I mean, we've already mentioned to say the height is actually shorter than the what? Than the width. Hope that makes sense. Okay, then the next one, the next shape is cuboidal. Cuboid. Okay, like cube. So whenever we talk of cuboidal, the cells actually appear in a cube shape or a square shape. So as you can see here, this guy, this cell looks like a shape, like a square, something like that. All right, so the height and the width are actually almost more or less equal. They look like squares in section. Okay, this is the keyword when you talk of cuboidal epithelium. All right, then what are the characteristics? So from looking at this diagram, I'm pretty sure you are able to come up with the characteristic of cuboidal epithelium. Number one, the height is almost equal to the what? To the width. Number two, they have a round what? They have a round nucleus. As you can see, a round nucleus which is central. It is located at the center of the cell. Please take note of that. So here, these are the characteristics here. So appears to have almost all equal sides, width, height, depth. I mean, I've already talked about that. Then have a central rounded nucleus. I've already mentioned that. Okay, so let's go to the next shape, columnar epithelium. So it looks like a column, right, or rectangular in shape. So as you can see here, this is a columnar epithelium, okay, resting on this basement membrane. This is the basement membrane. All right, so this is how you define it. As you can see, the height is actually longer than the what? Than the width. Then another characteristic is that they have an oval shaped what? Nucleus, which is located more to the base. So this is the apical side of a cell, and this is the basal part of the cell. And if you look at the nucleus, it is located more to the basal side, okay, where the basement membrane is, and it is oval in shape. Please take note of this. So these are the characteristics in elongated nucleus as well. Okay, so let's now take note of this one as well. So these diagrams that I was showing you on previous, they are ideal diagrams where I've drawn them like they are drawn, okay? But then when you actually look at these cells on the microscope, you find that these cells actually appear, because of the lipid membrane, the lipid rich membrane of the epithelial cells, they are actually indistinguishable. You are not able to see them properly, but you are able to see the dark stain of the nucleus. Okay, so you are able to characterize these epithelial cells according to the nucleus. So like as you can see here, these are the cells. These are the cells. I'm pretty sure you are, I don't know, not able to clearly see the where the cells are actually, demarcated, but you're able to see the nuclei here. So you're able to tell that from this nucleus here that I've drawn, it's actually oval shaped. So meaning that you're able to classify that this cell is actually what? It's actually columnar, right? It's columnar epithelium. Okay, then when you see a rounded nucleus, you're actually able to tell to say the epithelial cell will be what? It will be cuboidal. Then if you see flat nuclei, okay, maybe something like this, flat nuclei, you're able to tell to say, okay, the cell is what? It should be squamous, right? Something like that. All right, let's proceed. So now, wait. What if you have a single layered, flat epithelium? Let's make this practical, in which whereby we are now combining the two kinds of classifications to actually make this practical. Okay, so let's say you have a single layered flat epithelium, something like this. So it is one layer of cells and it is flat. So what do you call it? Now remember, we said whenever we have one layer, we classify it as simple, and whenever we have flat cells, we classify it as what? Squamous. So meaning that our answer to this question is that this classification is known as simple squamous epithelium. Are we together? In that manner, right? So what are the functions of simple squamous epithelium? Usually they are for efficient diffusion of substances. So wherever diffusion is actually taking place, you actually expect to find this kind of epithelial tissue. Okay, then it also provides smooth, thin surface. For example, in the blood vessels, okay, we need smooth flow of blood, so you expect such kind of epithelium to be found there. Okay, so these are the characteristics. It contains only one layer. I mean, you're able to tell from that. Then these are the characteristics. Okay, then another characteristic that I wanted to tell you about is the nuclei produce bulgings of the cell surface. So as you can see here, since it is flat, the nucleus will actually produce a bulging on the cell surface. So this is what I mean, this bulging. This is the nucleus producing this bulging. Okay, something like that. Okay, then where is it actually found? Where is simple squamous epithelium found? Number one, it's actually found in the alveoli of the lungs. Remember, I said where diffusion takes place, and in the alveoli, that's where diffusion of air is actually taking place. So you expect simple squamous epithelium to be found there. Then it is also found in free surfaces such as the pleura. You're going to learn about the pleura when talking about gross anatomy and stuff. So in the pleura, which is found in the lungs, covering the lungs here, then you have the serous pericardium for the heart and the peritoneum in the abdomen. So that's where simple squamous epithelium is actually found. And here you don't call it simple squamous epithelium, you actually call it what? You actually call it mesothelium. It is simple squamous epithelium, but because of the region where it is found, you call it mesothelium. Okay, then it also lines inside the heart, and since it is inside the heart, it is called endocardium. Then it is also found on the outer parietal layer of the Bowman's capsule and part of the tympanic cavity in the ear, and lines the blood vessels, like I mentioned, and lymphatics here. So because of this, it is called endothelium whenever it lines, the blood vessels and lymphatics. That being said, we proceed. Okay, so what if you have a multiple layered flat epithelium? So here we are talking about single layered flat epithelium. Now here we are having multiple layered flat epithelium. So as you can see from this diagram, we have multiple layers of epithelium, but multiple layers with flat epithelia on top there. So such, remember we said more than one layer, we called it stratified, and whenever you have flat cells we call it squamous. So meaning our answer to this is called stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, so now I'm pretty sure you're able to now, like, you must have a question to say how come the cells on top are actually flat and the ones in the middle look like polygonal or perhaps cuboidal, and the one down there they look columnar? Yes, usually this kind of stratified squamous epithelium, this is how it actually appears mostly. We classify it according to the ones on top of the ones on the superficial, okay, the superficial most layer. That's how we classify it. So what are the characteristics of stratified squamous epithelium? So number one, it is made up of several layers of tissues. As you can see from here, we have many layers, having the most superficial ones to be flat. So the cells of the deepest, so the deepest ones here, okay, what shape is this? They're actually columnar in shape. So the ones that rest on the basement membrane, the basement membrane is right here, so they're actually columnar in shape. Okay, then the intermediate one, this intermediate layer here, okay, the intermediate layer here is actually made up of usually polyhedral or cuboidal. So as you can see here, they look like polygons and stuff. These shapes, they actually look like polygons, right? These shapes here, then they're usually polyhedral or cuboidal in shape. Okay, then the most superficial layers are usually squamous, they are flat. So that's how we are able to classify this, because we classify it according to the most superficial layer. Okay, right. So now, when we talk of stratified squamous epithelium, it can be divided into two types. So it can be non-keratinized and keratinized, right? So stratified epithelium is actually usually found on places which are mostly administered to too much tension. Okay, So as you can see here, this is what I'm mentioning. So both keratinized and non-keratinized are found over areas that are subjected to tension, and as a result of friction, most superficial layers are constantly being removed because of that friction. So meaning that the most superficial layer is being removed and are replaced by proliferation. Remember that one of the characteristics of epithelial tissue is that they have high generation power. Okay, they're able to regenerate. So meaning that due to that high generation power, they actually show a frequent characteristic of what? Mitosis. Okay, so now let's talk of non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. So when we say keratinized, meaning that it contains keratin, then when you talk of non-keratinized, meaning that it does not have keratin. Okay, so what are the characteristics of non-keratinized stratified epithelium? So here it is found in surfaces that are mostly moist. So because it does not contain keratin, it's usually in surfaces that are mostly moist, and these surfaces are, for example, the mouth. It's usually moist with saliva, the tongue, the pharynx, the esophagus, the vagina, and the cornea, okay, of the eye. This is where non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium is actually found mostly. Okay, let's proceed. Then let's talk of keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Keratinized meaning it contains keratin. Okay, here, and it is usually found in epithelial surfaces which are usually dry. For example, the skin. Okay, so on the skin here it's usually dry, so meaning that on top of the skin, since it is dry, the cells, they tend to die on top here, and when they die, they are actually, those cells on top, they are actually filled up with a substance called keratin. Okay, and due to tension, this our superficial layer of skin is actually shed off, and then it is replaced by new cells. Okay, so the most superficial layers are usually die. I've already mentioned that. Then one thing is that when they die, they lose their nuclei. Take note of that. Okay, then they contain a substance called keratin, which is a non-living covering over the epithelium. So when the cells die, they are replaced by a non-living covering. Okay, so due to presence of keratin, hence it is called keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, now let's look at simple cuboidal epithelium. We're from looking at simple squamous and stratified squamous. Now let's look at simple cuboidal epithelium. So simple meaning one layer, cuboidal the shape. Okay, so this is how it looks like. Are we together? So when you look at it in this section here, it looks cuboidal. Then if you look at it on the surface view here, they actually look like polyhedral. Here they actually look polyhedral in shape. Okay, when you view it under the microscope. Then we've already mentioned the characteristic of the nucleus and everything. So mostly lines secretory elements such as the glands. Okay, and the epithelial cells are towards the lumen. They're usually towards the lumen. Okay, since it's in a gland, so yeah, they're usually towards the lumen. And then the ones which are towards the lumen, they're actually compressed against each other, hence they actually form a triangular shape. Okay, so I'm going to show you, this is how it looks like, because they are towards the lumen. This is the lumen, which is the hollow area, then they are actually compressed against each other, something like that, then they appear triangular in shape. Then the surface view of the epithelium are usually polygonal, so as you can see, I've already mentioned here, they appear polygonal. Okay, then where is simple cuboidal epithelium actually found? This is where it is found. It is found in direct gland follicles, ducts of glands, then found in surface of the ovary, and it is called geminoepithelium here. The choroid plexus is simply the one which produces cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, and it is lined by simple cuboidal epithelium. Then inner surface of the lens, the pigment layer of the retina, then the cuboidal epithelium with prominent brush border seen in the proximal convoluted tubule of the kidneys. Okay, so another thing is that since we've talked of simple cuboidal, now we talk of stratified cuboidal epithelium, and it is actually seen in what? In excretory ducts of what? Sweat glands and salivary glands. So usually this is usually glandular. This is usually found in glands. Okay, we proceed. Then let's look at simple columnar. Okay, so simple columnar. Um, Vertical view shows columnar or rectangular cells, while surface view also shows polygonal as well, just like in simple cuboidal. So as you can see here, in this surface view, it shows polygonal. Then in this view, it shows rectangular like shaped cells. Okay, so this is how they look like. So another type of simple columnar epithelium, so it depends with the way it is, with the specialized function of it. So usually you find that simple columnar epithelium can actually be specialized by having cilia on top of it. So as you can see, something like that. So whenever it has cilia, you call it ciliated simple columnar epithelium. Okay, and whenever you have cilia, meaning that it has this, the function of cilia is simply moving of substances. Okay, such as for example in the respiratory tract. To trap dust and move mucus. Then in the when you talk of simple ciliated simple columnar epithelium in the uh, reproductive system, such as for example in the females, it is actually used in the fallopian tube. It is actually used to move the ova towards the uterus. Okay, then so this is cilia there. That's the cilia, and that's the basement membrane. So this type is called ciliated columnar epithelium. Okay, then let's look at another one, another speciality of simple columnar epithelium. Instead of it containing cilia, it may contain microvilli, and whenever it contains microvilli, you call it brush border, striated border. Okay, let's move on. So where is it found? It is actually found, the one which without cilia or microvilli, it's actually present in mucous membrane of the stomach and the large intestine. Okay, then the one with, so as you can see here, this is a diagram showing that. So as you can see there, it is actually lined by what? By simple columnar epithelium without cilia or microvilli. Please take note of that. Then columnar epithelium with striated border, meaning that it contains microvilli, they are actually mostly found in the small intestine. Okay, so there you have it. There it has microvilli for efficient absorption of food nutrients. Okay, then with a brush border, it is found in the gallbladder. All right. Then ciliated columnar epithelium lines most of the respiratory tract, the one with cilia, okay, and the uterus and the uterine tubes and efferent ductals. So I've already explained in the respiratory tract and in the uterine tubes the function of that. Okay, so as you can see also there in the gallbladder, as we've already mentioned, it contains a brush border. Okay, then we have another one, since we're talking about simple columnar epithelium, we have stratified columnar epithelium, meaning that there are lots and lots of layers, more than one layer of columnar epithelium, and it is very rare. It is rare, and it is actually found in areas such as the conjunctiva in the eye, the pharynx, the anus, the male urethra. Okay, let's proceed. Then let's look at pseudostratified columnar epithelium. So pseudo means false, so meaning false stratified columnar epithelium. So it is a type of epithelium, as you can see from this diagram. It looks stratified, meaning that it looks like it has many layers, but yet it's actually one layer. Okay, it's actually one layer. Then what are the characteristics of pseudostratified columnar epithelium? Usually the nuclei appear to be arranged in two or more layers. So as you can see here, usually in a normal stratified columnar epithelium, the nuclei are arranged in a single horizontal line. But then for this one, it looks like the nuclei are actually in more than one layer of nuclei. So that's how you know that, okay, it is actually a pseudo stratified. Then another characteristic is that it is seen that there is usually only one layer of cells, but some cells are broader near the base and others are broader near the apex. So as you can see here, the other ones are broader near the base. The other one are broader near the apex. This is the apical part, this is the basal part. So now, how do you know How do you know? Because we said that due to the what the plasma membrane, it is indistinguishable. So we said that you're able to characterize that using the nucleus. So you should know that the nucleus will be found where it is actually broader. So you find that here where it is broader, that's where the nucleus will be found, and here where it is broader, that's where the nucleus will be found. So that's how you characterize pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Then another characteristic is that the nuclei lie in the broader part of each cell and are therefore not in one layer. So as you can see, for these cells, the nucleus is found on the broader part, and for these cells, the nucleus is found on the broader part. But all the cells actually are resting on one basement membrane. I forgot to add that. You can add it in your notes. All the cells here, all the epithelial cells are actually resting on one basement membrane. They are not resting on each other. Take note of that. Okay. Then where is it found? It is actually found in auditory tubes. So where pseudostratified columnar epithelium is found, it's found in these areas: the ductus deferens, the male urethra, specifically the membranous and penile part. Then it is also found in ciliated. The ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium is actually seen in the trachea and the large bronchi. Okay. Then let's look at the last one, which is transitional epithelium. So transitional, from the word transit, so meaning that it changes. Okay, it's not constant. So transitional epithelium, it's called transitional because it changes. Then it is found in the urinary system. This one is specifically for the urinary system. Don't even stress when you hear transitional epithelium. It is also known as urinary epithelium. Okay, so where is it found? In the renal pelvis, the calces, the ureter, the urinary bladder, and part of the urethra. Okay, then that it is, and because it is found in the urinary system, it is called what? Urothelium. I hope that makes sense. So it is called transitional. How does it transit? How does it transit, or how does it change? So whenever for example, I'll give an example of the urinary bladder. Whenever the urinary bladder is not filled up with urine, the cells actually appear to be cuboidal. Okay, they actually appear to be cuboidal because it is at rest. But then when it is filled up with urine, the cells actually appear what? They appear flat because the bladder has been stretched. So that's why it's called transitional epithelium, because the cells change their shape. Hope that makes sense. Then let's look at some of the clinical applications of epithelium. Okay, so the clinical applications, in short, what are some of the diseases or what can go wrong with epithelial tissue? So number one, we have immotile cilia syndrome or cartilaginous syndrome. Here, this type of epithelium, this type of disease, it's the one where one lacks dynein protein, causing immobility of the cilia. So dynein protein is the one that causes movement of the cilia. So now if you lack this protein, meaning that the cilia will be what? It will be actually immotile, meaning that the cilia won't be moving. So if you have this type of disease, especially in females, you find that the females will actually be infertile because the cilia are not able to move the ova. Okay, then if you have it in your respiratory tract, where cilia is actually very important in removing dust particles, you find that people will have respiratory problems. Then you have metaplasia. Metaplasia is just simply transformation of cells from, or perhaps tissues from one tissue to another. So remember, we talked of different kinds of epithelial tissues. So you find that when your cells undergo metaplasia, meaning that they change their shape. Okay, pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium, when it changes to stratified squamous epithelium. So this one, we actually call it squamous metaplasia, where your pseudostratified ciliated columnar in the trachea actually changes to stratified squamous epithelium. Then another clinical application that we can mention is tumor of the epithelial tissue. Okay, so whenever you have a tumor, it is actually usually called an adenoma or papilloma. All right, so let's look at the summary. So the summary, let's look at the main classifications of epithelial tissues. As we have already described the main classifications in terms of shape and number of layers. So here now, from what we are discussing, we said we have simple squamous epithelium, stratified squamous epithelium, simple cuboidal epithelium, stratified cuboidal epithelium, simple columnar epithelium, stratified columnar epithelium, pseudostratified columnar epithelium, transitional epithelium. Please, you must know their characteristics, where they are found, and everything, how to draw them and everything. Okay, then so these are some of the practice questions that I've put that I want you to please go through and try to attempt them so that you can see whether you've actually understood. And if you haven't understood, if you are not able to answer these questions, go back to the video and try to answer them. Okay, so with that being said, I think this is where we end our video. It's been quite a journey, but I hope you've enjoyed learning. And please like, share, and subscribe. I will post more videos on histology, embryology, and physiology and everything. So please keep in touch with us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I end this video here. Shalom, shalom.